UK.
Hi there, this is Nikolai Lundy, Director of Education Partnerships at SASB, and we're so excited to have you joining our webinar today. So thank you for spending some time with us. We've got three fantastic panelists who have gone through the FSA program and are going to talk a little bit about their experiences and answer any questions that you all have. So we will also, as a matter of housekeeping, be sending out the slides and a recording in case anybody who wasn't able to stay for the whole time or you want to pass along to colleagues, you can do that as well. And the last thing before we get into the content is that you can type in questions into the question box, and we will be sure to answer those as we go throughout the program. So just a quick overview of the agenda. We'll be talking a little bit about who our panelists are, make sure that they get a chance to introduce themselves, and then what the FSA Credential is, what some of the value that candidates get out of it, and then hear from our panelists about their experiences before we get into more details about the test-taking process and wrap up with plenty of time for questions. So without any further ado, we're going to introduce our panelists. We've got three great folks with three diverse but very relevant backgrounds, and really happy that they are able to join us. So let's start with Luca. Luca, can you please just introduce yourself to the group?
Yes, hi everybody. I'm Luca Grassadonia. I'm from Italy. Now I'm working as investment banking analyst with a big consulting multinational, but I've been an investment portfolio manager for almost 14 years, started in 1998. In 2007, I discovered sustainability and ESG criteria as an investment tool, and I've been studying it and developing it ever since.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Luca. We're really glad to have you. Victoria, we'd love to get to know you. Can you introduce yourself?
Surely. Good morning, everyone. My name is Victoria Kaler. I am the Controller and Top Accounting Executive at Scott Energy Technologies. We're an oil and gas service company that recycles and turns solid drilling waste into a safe and environmentally friendly construction product. And I was also an adjunct professor at ETBU teaching all of their advanced accounting courses for their MBA program. And I became an FSA Credential holder in 2017, I believe.
That's right. Thanks so much, Victoria. And Jackson, we'd love to get to know you as well. Please introduce yourself.
Yes, hi everyone, Jackson Love. I am Sustainability Program Manager for a large real estate owner and operator based nationally in the U.S. And in my role and in my profession, responsible for environmental sustainability and environmental, social, and governance reporting to stakeholders, including investors and customers.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Jackson. So as you can tell, we have three really wonderful, experienced panelists with us today, and also just a range of different backgrounds so they can really respond to the range of different participants that we have on the webinar. So let's get a sense for who is on the webinar and why you're here. We're going to launch a poll question that you should see coming onto your screen. And the poll just has 4 options, but the question is, what's your reason for being on today's call? And we'd just love to make sure that we get a sense of who's here and how to best spend our time. So you've got 4 options there. Seems like well over half of you have voted. We'll give just another second and then take a look at who we have. Okay, we're just at 90%, so I'm going to close the webinar and we'll take a look. Or close the poll, that is. All right, so we have a good mix, but the kind of broadest response was all of the above, but really about learning more about the credential, but not necessarily sure about what the path forward is, but then also a little bit of curiosity about how it can apply to a range of different audiences and geographies. So that's great. Thanks everyone for giving us that perspective. So we'll be sure to think about how to best customize our comments to try and make sure that we respond to the questions and the perspectives that you have. So let's dive into a little bit more about what the FSA Credential is before we hear a little bit more perspective from our panelists. So the FSA, which stands for Fundamentals of Sustainability Accounting, was developed really to help draw the connection between a company's performance on sustainability issues and their financial performance. And really, that has been the guiding principle from day one, because what was clear as SASB was being developed and we had more and more people and organizations interested in understanding how sustainability information could have a material financial impact on a company's performance, there was a disconnect between understanding what sustainability was, understanding how financial performance could be affected by it, and this was true across a range of different professions, not just sustainability professionals, not just analysts, not just finance professionals. So that was really the intent of the FSA Credential, and it was broken into two parts. One, level one, is really designed to cover the range of different concepts and the different puzzle pieces that fit across how sustainability information can be financial material, and what then are the implications for companies, for investors, and thinking about how they collect data, how they manage performance, how they analyze performance. And so level one is a broad range of concepts all sewn together, put the puzzle pieces together so you understand how this all fits in from the various different applications of this information. But then the level two was designed to be a little bit more application-based and focus on the practice of sustainability accounting and thinking about how either a company analyzing their own performance or an external analyst could gain an enhanced understanding of an individual company's performance or value from that information. And so the nature of this credential to really create a common language and common understanding across a range of different professional functions has been mirrored in the candidates who have actually signed up. And so we see a range of different professional backgrounds and expertise. Most of the candidates coming through the program have already gone through some sort of post-secondary either education or certification process and spend about 20 to 30 hours. So this is not something that's designed to be a CFA or a CPA that's tens or hundreds of hours of study. It's really designed to be a supplement to tie these different concepts together. And there's no one right period of your career to take it. We've seen a broad spread from just a few years into the professional workforce, or those who have decades of experience. And I think the reason that we've seen that, as we've talked to a range of different candidates, is because they really view this as an opportunity to expand their awareness and expertise in some of these issues that they either personally care about or recognize as important to their business, or recognize as an area for differentiation in the market. And so some of those who already have certifications or other credentials are able to get continuing education credits for that work. And we'd like to better understand who all of you are and what background you come from. So we're just going to spend a moment to launch another poll. And you've got 5 different options here. If there's one that's not a perfect fit, you don't necessarily have to answer it, or you can just choose whichever is closest. These are the ones we see most often among the candidates. So we'll give you a second to respond, and then take a look at the results. Okay, we've got just shy of 90% answered, so let's take a look. So interesting to see here that almost half, 40%, are in the investment management industry, and the kind of next closest are sustainability practitioners, with consultants close behind. That's not terribly different from what we see among our current candidates. So let's take a look at who tends to be signing up. So from the 700 or so, about 750 who signed up for the level 1 exam, the different breakdown of backgrounds and experiences and test taker job roles from investors, consultants, and corporate sustainability professionals actually pretty closely matches who we have on the webinar. So it sounds like we're speaking to the right folks. We have attendee or candidates for the program who come from a range of different geographies, 22 different countries, and as we've said before, about half are well into their career. So that's a little bit about the background. We'll get into more details about the curriculum and what you can expect to if you end up pursuing the study program. But let's hear from our panelists a little bit more about their experiences and how they have found and what motivated them to take the credential. So let's start with kind of perhaps the most relevant and easiest question to get your hands around, which is, why did you end up getting the FSA credential? So we'll hear from all of our panelists, but let's start with Victoria. Can you shed a little bit of light about what motivated you to end up going through the program?
Surely. Most of my customers are publicly traded companies, and they don't really understand the waste they are generating well enough to know what sustainability issues they are faced with by not testing and disposing of it properly. So I obtained the FSA credential so I could help, really guide them through the topic and be a source of information for their accounting and sustainability reporting team. So when they have questions, I wanted to be there and be, have the accreditation to say I've studied the material. I can help explain this and get you on a right path towards reporting your information.
Got it. So it sounds like it was a way for you to be able to better support your customers, but also have something credible to reference as kind of the qualifications that you've earned.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, fantastic. Jackson, I'm curious, what was it that motivated you to pursue the FSA credential?
Sure. So going back to what you said about folks' background, so I earned my MBA in 2012, right around the time when SASB was first getting off the ground, and so learned about SASB early on. Having studied sustainability in business school, was really interested in the topic of reporting standards for sustainability. So I participated in the early bird round of SFA exam taking, and I would say that in my role as a sustainability manager, it's really important to have an understanding of the financial materiality as it relates to sustainability drivers in an organization. And so I'd say that in my understanding of SASB and its approach to reporting standards, it seemed like a valuable program and valuable knowledge to gain and be able to demonstrate to the market having earned and attained that knowledge.
Great. So it sounds like you're approaching sustainability for your organization as a way to really tie the link to how it creates value within the organization. Is that fair?
Absolutely.
Okay. Luca, certainly we have a number of folks on the call who are in the investment management industry. What motivated you to pursue the FSA?
Okay. I've been looking for a long time, I mean, since 2007, for a training program who could teach me how to integrate sustainability and ESG criteria in the fundamental analysis of stocks or of companies. And I tested many different propositions. Well, as I'm a CFA charter holder, the first port of call was the CFA Institute. But till today, they don't really have a program dedicated to ESG. I checked for other institutions like the UN PRI and also the GRI. But finally, I came across the FSA Credential. And when I looked into it, I discovered a program which has really all the things that I need to apply ESG to fundamental analysis. So that's why I decided to take the FSA Credential and study the SASB standards.
Yeah,
okay,
Nikolai,
got it. Yeah, go ahead,
Jack. If I could just build on what Luca said there, because I think that's a really interesting point he made about some of the other standards that exist, like GRI, which are very relevant also, but I think that SASB takes a slightly different approach in really focusing in on the financial materiality and tying that to the accounting standards that are identified.
Great, thanks for that, Jackson. And the fact is that that's one of the reasons that we kind of are here working and trying to fill like what was a potential gap in the market, is thinking about how this concept of sustainability can really serve understanding the financial performance and ultimately plug into fundamental analysis, as Luca was talking about. So Jackson, let's kind of build off what you were just saying to think about, was there anything that you learned that really stuck with you? We've talked a little bit about the differences with other kind of curriculums out there, but was there something that you still remember or that you didn't expect to learn as you were going through the program?
Yeah, I'd say the thing that sticks with me most is the materiality map. I think that's what you call it, right? The big matrix of industries and accounting standards or sustainability drivers.
Yeah, the metrics.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that materiality map I think is really helpful, and I haven't come across anything else that summarizes in quite a concise way across, however many sectors and industries are covered by the SASB standards. But being able to pull up that materiality map and quickly drill down by industry and identify what are the factors that are most important to that specific industry, and having done all the research that SASB has to back up those the underpinnings of why a certain industry has, say, greenhouse gas emissions as an important factor where another industry may not.
Great. So it sounds like one of the real takeaways was the fact that sustainability can be considered as different issues, different information, industry by industry, and that's an important lens, for, at least in your mind.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Luca, same question. Was there anything you learned as you went through the study guides and the program that really stuck with you or that you didn't expect to learn?
Well, I must say that I found something which was very comforting to learn, which is that sustainability can be non-judgmental. And I found this aspect of the SASB standards very, very important, because there's a lot of confusion in the investment world about what is sustainable. And many people use ethics or an ethical approach, which is sends you completely off the rocks. Whereas the non-judgmental approach of SASB standards and metrics means that you're not trying to say that something is good or bad, but you just give us a tool to make our own judgments. And really, really important for me.
That's really interesting. I actually haven't heard that in a while, Luca, but I'm really glad you brought that up, because that is something that's slightly different about how the FSA Credential addresses sustainability, that it doesn't try to define that some things are sustainable and some things are not. It's really about characterizing certain information as helping, certain information related to sustainability issues that helps you make an assessment or understanding of a company's performance without saying what's good or bad, and leaving that ultimately to the eye of the analyst, the eye of the company, the eye of the market, rather than saying this is sustainable and is always good and this is not sustainable and should be avoided. So I often forget that, but that's something that is quite different. So thanks for bringing that up, Luca. Victoria, I'm sure you know what to expect here. Is there anything you've learned that really stuck with you when you're going through the program, or that you didn't expect to learn, whether it's the same as what Jackson and Luca said, or could be different?
Yeah, actually, I have a little bit of a different spin on what they were saying. One thing I was really surprised to take away was learning so much about the investor side of sustainability and ESG issues. So I have almost always been the vice president of finance or controller or CFO of corporations, so I don't have very much exposure on the investor side of it. The FSA study material really helped me close the loop and have a much better understanding of how corporate use and investor use are really just two sides of the same picture. Depends on which angle you're looking at it from. So I always thought I was pretty enlightened at ESG issues, but all of a sudden things started to dawn on me about how the investor would digest the information or would want to see something in a certain way, that I would never have considered before the FSA. And after going through the study material and learning all that was required to pass the FSA, it really helped open my train of thought and thinking of it in more of a broad, big picture versus just my, isolated corporation side of it.
Wow, that's music to my ears. Just because, as I said at the beginning, we really wanted to help, put all the puzzle pieces together and create a common understanding, because this information is not limited to just companies or just investors, but it applies to those two kind of key players in the market, and then those who support and advise them throughout. So that's wonderful to hear that was enlightening. So thank you for sharing that, Victoria.
Thank you.
So let's cover one more kind of general question. We'll get into a little bit more details of the curriculum, and we've got a couple questions that have started coming in from the audience, but we might cover some of that later on, and then if we don't, we'll make sure to swing back before we get to the end of the webinar. But for now, let's just cover one more general overview question, which is how has the FSA Credential helped you in your work, or has it even? So Luca, let's start with you. Has the FSA and kind of going through the program helped you in the work that you do?
Yes, definitely. I would say that till now the most important thing in which it has helped me is in valuing intangibles. I mean, it's always very difficult to value intangible assets. And if you consider that some say that 80% of the market cap of any index in any stock index in this world is made by intangibles. And then you can understand how important it is to have a methodology or a guide to do that. And this is a thing that has been tried many times in the past, always failing. I don't know if anybody remembers the economic value added model, EVA, or something like that, which failed miserably. So sustainability and ESG criteria to me and the FSA credential helped me to gave me a guide, a sure guide to value intangibles, or at least give it a try.
Okay, great. That's interesting to hear. And for those who aren't necessarily familiar with the kind of different, the way in which intangibles are such a large component of value in the market these days, at the end of the webinar, when we send out the slides, we'll include a link to some of that research for those who might be curious, since Luca referenced it. Victoria, how about you? Has the FSA credential helped you in your work? Maybe, maybe not. Any perspective there?
Oh, it's absolutely helped. It's been a very helpful way to be able to offer our customers a conversation about the sustainability of their waste practices and how it affects their bottom line. Having the FSA credential shows people that, you know, I've really mastered the material and concept, and that I'm able to offer real insight and information for them to consider in their ESG reporting. So while, you know, dealing with drilling waste, a field level drill manager may not be all that interested in hearing about sustainability, but once it makes it, you know, up into the accounting department and environmental department, and even if they have a sustainability department nowadays, you know, I'm able to offer real insight for that information and provide information and data to help them calculate the relevant figures to translate it into their financials. So, you know, what does this mean financially? And I'm able to help put some advice and insight on that for them.
Well, that's great. Sounds like it's plugging right into the core competency that you're providing to your clients. That's wonderful to hear. Jackson, curious, same question for you. Has the FSA credential helped you in your work? Maybe, maybe not. Doesn't have to. But if it has, I'm sure people would be curious to hear.
Yeah, sure. So I've got a couple thoughts on this. You're kind of looking at the big picture. I feel like we are still early days when it comes to sustainability reporting maturing as a business function and really reaching a point of widespread recognition within the business and investment community. So I think we're still early days, and I can't say that the FSA has been something that that I see as a required credential for job descriptions or something that is widely understood by people outside of the sustainability world. I think that we will get there, and so I've kind of hedged my bets in that regard in being early and getting into this credential program, because I do think that over time we're going to see more and more adoption of SASB standards and of sustainability reporting in general. But I'd say to drill it down to what I do in my current role, there are a number of ways that having the lens of financial materiality has really been valuable to the direction that we are going with the sustainability program here where I'm at, and having aligned our public sustainability goals with the accounting standards that come from SASB's real estate owners, developers, and investment trust standards document. It is something that has been valuable to really underpin the rationale for setting those goals and why did we choose to measure it in one way versus another. So I would say just kind of going back once again to that idea of financial materiality and the evidence-based approach to developing standards really has helped me to convey to our stakeholders the value of what we are doing and measuring in terms of our performance.
Great. Thanks so much, Jackson. And certainly I think you're absolutely right that although there's been a lot of progress on many fronts for many organizations, there's still early days in thinking about sustainability, ESG, how it impacts the way companies assess their own performance, how they report that publicly when appropriate, and how that gets incorporated into analyst views. So certainly evolving month by month, it seems. Well, let's thank you so much, Luca, Victoria, and Jackson, for kind of walking us through some of your high-level perspectives on why you ended up signing up, what you learned, how it's fit into your work. And so let's spend a little bit more time for the audience just going through some of the details of the curriculum, and then we'll get back to our panelists and start turning to some of the questions that have already been submitted and those that we haven't answered yet. So as I mentioned before, the FSA Credential comes with two parts. The level one is, as I mentioned, really about the overarching concept. And so that breaks down into three kind of key takeaways and focus areas for the curriculum. The first is how sustainability information can be material in the same way as financial information. And so what that really means is setting the scope for when we're talking about sustainability information, what is it that we're talking about in this case? It ranges from not just environmental issues, but also social issues related to labor practices, related to customer welfare, but then also kind of business model and operations issues related to supply chain management and other kind of operational elements that wouldn't be captured in financial statements. So that's really the first part, is setting the scope for what it is that we're talking about with sustainability information, not things that are kind of commonly understood. You know, it's not recycling or composting or things like that. It's really about business activities. And then also thinking about what does it mean to be financially material? What does it mean that there can be a connection between this information and financial performance? So that's really the first concept. And lays out a broad overview of the corporate reporting, legal, and disclosure landscape for these issues. Then the next really turns to a lot of content around SASB standards, and the SASB process for taking feedback from companies, from investors, from consultants, from accountants, academics, researchers, others, really serving as a centralized aggregator of market insights, and then turning that, where there's consensus in the market, turning that into standardized topics and disclosure metrics, and the process and the purpose for going about doing that, and how to understand what the SASB standards are meant to do and where they're not meant to be used. For example, they're not meant to be used as a value judgment, or they're not meant to make value statements. SASB doesn't decide what is right or wrong. It really decides this is information that can help, based on what we hear from the market, help the market understand a company's performance. So we walk through all of that. And then the last segment of the level one curriculum is really about what are the implications? How would measuring, analyzing, reporting material standardized sustainability information impact the way that companies and investors go about their regular activities, and where this can be integrated into those processes? So that's really level one. It's about a 150-page study guide, and as we said before, it takes usually about 20 to 30 hours. Some people spend a little bit less time, some people spend more, but if you think of a bell curve, the bulk of the candidates fall within that 20 to 30 hour range. Level 2, very similar story, same length of study guide, more or less, around 150, 160 pages, around the same amount of time. But as we said before, it's really about thinking about application, and rolls through a series of kind of miniature case studies, hypothetical examples, surfacing potential data and using it to sustainability data and using it to understand a company's performance or how that might be connected to projections for value. And so that's broken into 3 parts as well. The first is really about thinking about how a company's operations or operating context really influences what sustainability information is most likely to be material. If you are in the utilities industry, but you're not actually generating any electricity, you're just serving as a distributor, that's going to be the sustainability information that's most financially material to you is going to be very different from the utility companies that are generating power, operating plants, not just the ones distributing it across the grid. And so we really rock through the fact that it's not always a one-size-fits-all for every company, even if they are in the same broad industry. So you really have to understand how other information could influence the materiality of certain sustainability data. The next section really looks at comparison. How might you understand and compare peer companies, thinking about normalization techniques, what data you might want to use to normalize, not just revenue necessarily, but it might be other business data such as number of customers, number of square footage of real estate, if you're in Jackson's industry, or other kind of business data or contextual information to help with accurate comparison. And then the last is really about thinking about the connection between how data disclosed in consistent with the SASB standards and consistent with the metrics and topics that appear in those standards might be used to inform a DCF or other financial model. Thinking about, one thing that we don't do is say, this is the right way to adjust a model. There's really, any number of different answers to that. What we really do is draw the link between some sustainability information is more tied to thinking about growth prospects, whereas other information might be more tied to risk and cost of capital. Not all sustainability information would be treated in the exact same way. So how can you think about that when you're understanding the link between sustainability performance and financial value? And so the entire study guide kind of breaks down these concepts, takes them piece by piece, and then tries to tie them together into broader, as I said, miniature case studies, which might just be 5, 6, 7 paragraphs, a data table, and then there's a few questions for each case study. So one thing that I want to emphasize is how the curriculum was developed, where there was a range of different external reviewers that were able to weigh in with their expertise, with their perspective, but we had to get a broad range of curriculum or expertise in order to fit the different types of candidates that we have coming through the FSA Credential. So we had corporate sustainability professionals, we had PMs and analysts, we had consultants, we had corporate finance professionals that were involved in setting out the scope, identifying the learning objectives, providing feedback on the content, and then ultimately taking that and turning it into exam questions. And so we had usually around 1 or 2 SASB sector analysts involved for each exam going through the development process, and then anywhere from 10 to 12 external subject matter experts supporting that. And that was really so that the curriculum was designed to support the practices and perspectives that people in the market were having. And we have a full list of advisors and supporters and contributors and exam writers on our website, and just some of them listed here just to show the range of different perspectives and the range of different expertise and types of organizations who were involved. So before we get back to our panelists, want to do one final poll question to get a sense of what is motivating your interest, so that we can spend the last 10 or 15 to 20 minutes really zeroing in on what's most relevant. So if you don't mind letting us know what's the main reason you're interested. It could be that you just want to learn more about these subjects as ongoing education. It could be that you are thinking about how this can support your career path and having a credential to reinforce the credibility of expertise in this space. Or you could be interested in better connecting with folks who are in the space currently and just want to be part of the network of FSA credential holders. So that's about everyone who's voted. We'll give it another, we've got about 3/4 of you voted, so we'll give another couple seconds. Okay, and I apologize for the background noise. As can be the case in any major city, there's always background noise. We try to avoid it as much as we can. But interestingly, with over 80% of you voting, we are almost entirely split between just learning more as ongoing education or being part of your kind of deliberate career advancement, with many fewer of you really interested in the broader network. Okay, so that's very helpful as we turn to the last kind of round of dialogue with our panelists. So Luca, Victoria, and Jackson, I want to start with at least one question that might be helpful for the audience to review or hear before we turn into some of the questions that we've gotten through the chat portal, which is that we've walked through various aspects of the FSA credential, the curriculum, the time it takes to prepare, things like that. But let's talk about how it might improve. Obviously, nothing that can be everything to everybody. And so we want to make sure that those who are on the webinar get a sense of how it might be useful for them, but also it's not necessarily going to be a perfect fit for everybody. So if you had your say, what was it you'd like to see changed or adjusted with the credential? Let's start with you, Victoria, to see if you have any thoughts on what you might like to see evolve and change as the credential moves forward.
Well, I think part of this all goes back to what Jackson was saying earlier, is that you have to start somewhere. So I think as the world of sustainability and ESG reporting evolves and becomes more sophisticated, that there will be more details. There'll be more more information in general to go deeper into the subject and get a bigger bite of it.
Okay, well, that's helpful to know. How about you, Luca? Any thoughts on what you'd like to see change or evolve from the credential, or things you'd like to see done differently?
Well, I would like to see the credential evolving into a charter. As sometimes someone has mentioned before at the SASB. Because really I see it as a natural extension to the CFA program. And so it would be nice to have more integration, maybe let's say that it really, I think that in the future it will be an integral part of it. But now I'm elaborating maybe too much, but that's how things are accelerating, at least in the investment world, about sustainability and ESG, that almost everybody now is trying to do it. And so it's not a fringe argument anymore. And so I guess that the FSA credential could evolve into a proper charter.
Okay, great. Yeah, thanks for weighing in on that, Luca. And certainly something that we're mindful of is how this can evolve to become more of a standard certification or charter, as you outlined. How about you, Jackson? Anything that you wish was different or would like to see changed with the credential?
Yeah, you know, I imagine the credential process has probably evolved a bit since I took the FSA Level 2 exam 2 years ago. I think that at that time, there was a limited number of practice questions for test takers. So just kind of from a practical test taking standpoint, I think that the deeper and richer that the study materials can be, and especially practice questions and exam questions as well, I think just enhances the learner experience.
All right, and you're right, Jackson, that that was something that has continued to evolve since the very first test takers and the first cohort like you. So we've been able to expand that, and I think there's always room for more test taker support. So hopefully for those of you on the webinar, that gives you a little bit of sense of where the credential not only is currently, but where it might be going and how you might factor that into your interest analysis. So let's turn to some of those questions that we've gotten from the audience. Some of them we've already been able to answer, but some of them I'm sure it's helpful for everyone to hear. So I have my colleague here, Andreas Tapas. If you have emailed us or engaged with the FSA Credential before, I'm sure you've talked with him. So he's a familiar name to many of you, I imagine. But Andreas, what questions do we have from the audience?
Yeah, so we have some really great questions. The first one is, how is the FSA different from the courses provided by UNPRI?
Okay, great. Luca, you mentioned the PRI courses. Do you have any perspective on what might be different there?
Well, okay, so we are among friends here, so I can say that the PRI courses, I found it not very serious. It's too few hours to be relevant. I mean, I'm guessing one is 6 hours, the other one, there's a second level with 8 hours, something like that. And it's also administered in conjunction with an asset manager, a European asset manager, which is called the Robico SAM. So what you're getting is their own approach. I mean, if you're getting something in 14 hours of study, and nothing to compare with the FSA Credential, really, which is worth, may I remember it, almost, it's worth 2 years of continuing education according to the CFA program. So it's 20 plus 20 hours of continuing education recognized. So we are on another league completely here.
Okay, got it. Thanks, Luca. So it sounds like they're just very different programs, and the FSA has just got a little bit more to it. Any other questions from the audience, Andreas?
Yes, we have a great question about the logistics of the program. Like, what are the pass rates for both level 1 and 2? And then how many people actually hold the FSA Credential?
So maybe I'll answer that, and then if anybody on our panelists are interested, then we can hear from them as well. But the pass rate is around 80% for level 1. It's around 70% for level 2. Certainly not the hardest exam out there, but don't say that to the folks who haven't passed. So certainly some challenge, but not something that causes extreme anxiety. And then how many people hold the FSA Credential? So it's about 200 plus who've gone through both exams. As you can imagine, there's kind of a lag period where people will sign up and they spend several months studying, and then they take the exam, and then they might spend up to a year before signing up for the next one. So we have 700, over 700 are in some phase of the program, and only about 200 or so, maybe around 250. It's been a couple months since we looked at the numbers last, who have gone through the entire thing. So that's where we are with the kind of scope of those who are involved. So hopefully that answers those questions. Anything else, Andres?
Yes, we have another one about international applicability. And so one question was, it seems that the FSA Credential is more present in the U.S., but do we believe that would be helpful for people operating outside the U.S. to obtain the credential?
Okay, well, sounds like this might be one. At least we can start with Luca, and then I don't know, Victoria, Jackson, if you guys would want to chime in. But Luca, any thoughts? You are based outside the U.S. You're based in Italy. Any perspectives on that question?
Well, of course I do. Let's say that sometimes the short answer is yes. It's 100% useful also from an international perspective. You have to think about it as confronting, let's say in the accounting world, the US GAAP standard against the international accounting standard. So whenever there is a mention about US rules in the SASB standards, there probably will be equivalent rules, let's say in the EU, in the European Union. So the reasoning is that you have to do is this, if US rules are not material to my company, because I'm only in the local market here, doesn't mean that I cannot find an equivalent rule to refer to. And if I don't, then I can refer back to the US law which is mentioned, which is exactly the same approach that CFA charter holder uses when analyzing an international company. So maybe the only thing is that perhaps it could be a little bit explained a little bit better that this is possible and how, in fact, how to do it, because many times I come across regulations in the EU which are the mirror of US regulations and are mentioned in the SASB standards. So I've had to do a little bit more work to find out where are the differences and if they crisscross and how, but it's just some more work to do, but it's very valuable at the end of the day because I found out many things that I didn't know even existed here, let's say, this way.
All right, thanks so much for weighing in on that, Luca. So we've got certainly a few more questions. It looks like with the time we won't be able to get to all of them. Let's do at least two more. Victoria and Jackson, I think you'll be able to probably weigh in on them. And then we'll wrap up with some final details on the test-taking process. So Andreas, of our remaining questions, what might be the next one?
Yeah, so I think this next one's a really great question, and it's, what are the most challenging aspects of the program?
All right, let's see. Victoria, do you want to weigh in on that? You don't have to. We can also ask others, but just to keep it organized, so I might prompt.
Sure. The most challenging aspect of the program, I think, would be, unless you're coming from a true investment background, that there's a lot more to it. I have a MPA, so I have a master's in professional accountancy. So I really understood, the accounting part of it, Sarbanes-Oxley, that was really where my background was. But I think it encompasses more, and that's part of the challenge is that, coming into this, you're exposed to different things and you see or learn about different topics that you hadn't really considered before. And just by going through the process of studying and learning the material, it really gives you a broader, understanding of, what's going on in the industry. And of course, learning about anything that's happening or trending in your industry is always positive. It's always an advantage to help you be better equipped to know what's going on.
Thanks, Victoria. Just in the interest of time, I think we'll try and get one more audience question and then wrap up. So what's our last question, Andreas? Yeah, so in regards to ESG measurement and reporting, could you please provide examples of how the credential could be used to advance an issuer's governance practices? Okay, Jackson, Shorenstein has recently gone through and started reporting with the SASB standards. You've probably thought about how it is informing your own internal practices. Do you want to weigh in on that question?
And could you just restate the question one more time? Was it specific to governance practices?
Yeah, so how could you provide examples of how the FSA could be used to advance governance practices?
It's a very good question. I'm not sure if I've got a specific example from my own professional context, given that the real estate industry is really heavily concentrated in environmental impact, and the provisional standards reflect that. I think I would say that governance is, in general, a very important topic. Investors ask about it frequently, and that depending on the industry, governance factors that cover things like business ethics and adherence to international standards around bribery and corruption are very important to certain industries, and I think that that's reflected in the standards for those industries. So if a given business is in an industry that has some of those sort of high-profile material governance risks, then there would be some sort of accounting standard or guidance around disclosures that should be made for that industry.
Thanks, Jackson. And I'll just chime in briefly from SASB's perspective. We've heard from a range of different folks who have gone through the FSA Credential and or used the SASB standards that they have found that sometimes it's difficult to get sustainability onto the radar of their board or their senior executive team. But when they have been able to frame it and use some of the concepts and ideas introduced in the FSA Credential around financial performance and materiality, that has changed the conversation and allowed them to make some progress in building more robust board level oversight and just consideration of these issues. So that's at least what we've heard from some folks. So in the waning minutes of the program, I just want to give some details because we've had one or two questions on the audience participation around the logistics for signing up. So there are testing blocks. So you're able to take the exam during 6 months of the year, 3 2-month periods. You can take the exam in January, February, May or June, September or October. The exams are offered online or in person around the world. There's hundreds of different test taker locations. But you can sign up at any time. So it's July, you can sign up for any of the available dates in September or October. And as months go by, new testing periods open up. And there's a range of different resources that you can take advantage of if you want to go through the program. There's a candidate handbook, which gives you some of the kind of policies and what you need to know. There's the study guides that you get when you sign up. There's sample questions as well as explanations to those sample questions in the actual study guide. There's an optional online prep course, which is independent from SASB, but some candidates take that, although the majority do not. And then there's a set of reminders that we give to everyone to make sure that everything goes smoothly, including if you are taking the exam by webcam, proctored remote proctoring. So if you have additional questions, feel free to check out the website. You can email us. We'll be happy to answer your questions. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you very much to Victoria, Luca, and Jackson. We really appreciated you sharing your perspectives, and we hope that everyone has a great day, and we'll follow up with all the details after the webinar. Thanks so much, everyone.